Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this exciting CohenTalks. This installment is our Business Career Roundtable, navigating the job search during COVID-19. And my name is Glen Midkiff. I will be your moderator for the event. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a proud alumni of Marshall, and I'm also the chapter advisor to SAM and DSB. I'm the stakeholder engagement director for the Lewis College of Business. And so what I want to talk to you about is the Ron and Sandy Cohen Business Professionalism Speaker Series before we get started. It's an enrichment program offered by Marshall University and the Lewis College of Business. And the series allows for students from the Brad D. Smith Schools of Business to make a connection between classroom teachings and real-world business applications. And this year's theme is Game Changers in Business and Beyond. And we're seeking how to understand how Marshall University alumni and friends have been successful and innovative in the world of work. So as we know, COVID-19, it was declared a pandemic. There have been glimmers of new opportunities for job seekers, many of them remotely. So as hiring accelerates and people are getting shots in arms, millions of employees will be looking for lots of different jobs, and our students and upcoming graduates will as well. And so searching for a job can be stressful, stressful for anyone, but really now, especially during the pandemic. And so it's tough. So let's get started discussing what can be done, looking for that next role, whether it is an internship or a full-time position. So before we get started, I want to introduce you to our panelists today. Panelists, if you could wave and identify yourself, that would be much appreciated. We have Bruce Felder. He's the Director of HR at Marshall University. Sara James, she's a professional recruiter at Cabell-Huntington Hospital. And Raymond Washington, he's an area rental manager at Enterprise. So attendees, if you have questions, please ask them in the chat box. We will review them at the end of the presentation. So panelists, let us begin. So this session is divided up into 3 segments: before, during, and after the job interview process. So before we get started, each of the panelists can give a short introduction about themselves and the company where they work. So we'll start with Mr. Felder.
Thanks, Glenn. Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce Felder. I'm the Director of Human Resource Services at Marshall University. I've been employed here for about 7 years. Absolutely love the university and the students in which we get to work with and the employees, and to create a better environment in which we all live and breathe. Prior to the university here, my former walks of life included working with Sara James at Cabell-Huntington Hospital for about 13 years. Also 20 years in the military. And my roots actually stem from the restaurant business. I was a general manager for a local restaurant for about 10 years. So 4 different industries down in higher education, and getting to put HR and the HR, what we call our HR professionalism to work in all these industries has been a wonderful learning experience for myself over the years. And that's a little bit about me. Turn it over to Sara.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sara James. I am a professional recruiter at Cabell-Huntington Hospital, and I have worked in HR and at Cabell for 10 years now, which is crazy to me. And yes, Bruce was my first manager out after I graduated college. So shout out to Bruce. But yeah, I absolutely love what I do. I am a professional recruiter, so I work in the hiring and employment side of HR. So part of why I love it is it's exciting to be able to offer someone a job, and they're so thankful, grateful, and excited for that opportunity. So that's really meaningful for me, and I'm really excited to speak with all of you today on how to navigate obtaining a fulfilling career after you graduate, or even an internship that will prepare you for finding that big opportunity after you graduate. So even in COVID-19 times, it can be done with some tenacity. You just can't get discouraged. So we can discuss that. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Raymond Washington. Thanks a bunch for having us today, Glenn. I think it's an excellent opportunity to really get in front of students and talk them through the process of kind of what comes after college. But as Glenn stated, I'm an area rental manager for Enterprise Holdings. We're a global transportation company. We've got 7,600 locations in 85 countries, so we're truly global. What I do is I oversee operations for 11 branches here in the tri-state area. And so, you know, before I joined Enterprise, I was in social work, so a little bit different than business, but wasn't really sure that I wanted to stay that route and wanted to open up a chain of daycares. And so didn't know business, but new child development. And someone taught me Enterprise would teach you how to run a business and kind of get the MBA without the IOU is what they used to say. So joined Enterprise, and really the company really spoke to my competitive side, continue to do well. And obviously have been here for some time now, but you know, I think it's oftentimes we don't know exactly what we want to do, even though we get that degree. It may end up somewhere else. So I think, you know, the more you can expose yourself to different opportunities as you're going through college and even, you know, right after, and find your passion, that's going to be what's going to speak to you the most. So I'm really excited to get the opportunity to talk to all the students today.
Well, thank you, Raymond. Thank you, panelists. I think this is going to be an excellent session. I've been waiting for it all week, and I think our students have too. I think, especially for our graduates, graduation is coming up soon. In fact, it's next week. So, what are the common mistakes that people make when submitting their application? And, you know, do these mistakes affect how applicants are tracked?
Okay.
We can, whoever wants to go first.
I would say maybe, I'm not quite sure it's a common mistake, but maybe a missed opportunity would be not tailoring your cover letter and your resume to the position that you're applying for. So if you can't have access to a job description, if not the job posting, what are the requirements? What are the skill sets that the employer has posted for that job? So really hone in on that, and then tailor your resume and your cover letter to those skills that your employer is looking for, and really go back into your experience and really use those experiences to showcase that you have the skill set that the employer needs.
I would say making sure that you take the time to fill out all the relevant fields, because, you know, our system, it has a place for you to fill out a lot of things that may be included in your resume. And what we'll see sometimes is people put C resume. Well, and I know we're going to talk about it in a minute, but artificial intelligence and filtering sometimes misses that information in your resume or your application. And you may not get filtered through quite as quickly, because now the recruiter, the person who's processing that, has to do it manually to find your information. So, you know, take your time. If it's a job that you've really researched and you really want to obtain, go ahead and fill out every single part of that application so that they don't have to dig and find that.
Yes, Glenn and panelist members, I can't agree with you more. Prior preparation for filling out jobs, as they say, those P's, prevents that poor performance. And if you want to remember that, you have to not assume that we as hiring managers know you. You can't assume that. You have to tell us everything about you. Remember, you're the one who wants the job. So preparation is so key in this regard. And please take the time to do it correctly. We are all in this mobile environment, and we're filling out all of those applications on these mobile devices, and we forget that we're not texting our friends. I hate when I open up a resume and someone has this, what we call text talk, and you're applying for a professional job. So if you remember one thing, remember that you have to have that prior preparation, and that you are applying for a job and not simply answering an email or a text message on your phone or your mobile device.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bruce. So I can put in emojis in my in my application. I don't think that's a good idea. So I think, Raymond, you mentioned you know, artificial intelligence, AI playing a larger role of how applicants are processed, and you know, as applicants apply, one of the things that they need to realize is there's an applicant tracking system, and so, you know, could you talk a little bit about that? What is an applicant tracking system and how are candidates evaluated in that process?
Yeah, I think every company is probably a little different, but I think Sara alluded to it before. I think it's really important to make sure you tailor the information to the job you're applying, because just like if you were to go onto Indeed or maybe even LinkedIn and you're looking for a particular job, keywords are important, right? And so, a company may get 10, 15, 20 applications for one position, and you've got one person that's processing that. And obviously the filtering systems are going to pick up those words that we're looking for, so we can process those and get those to the prospective person who's doing the interview the quickest, right? Efficiency is key. And obviously, as always, technology is going to continue to really, move forward. It's not going to go away. And so making sure that you're tailoring it to that position is important. But, our company has a special system that we use, but I think most companies use some type of filtering system in the initial process.
Yeah, if I can add, Glenn, to the question here, one thing that we overlook is simply the platform of social media, specifically with LinkedIn and that same AI technology that we've been talking about. If in your LinkedIn profile, the jobs that you're wanting, you go out, you can update your LinkedIn profile that will use that same AI technology to pull you into these recruiters. I've made a couple of simple changes to my LinkedIn profile, just updating some credentials that I've gained over the years. And next thing I know, I have all these people shooting me email. And I was like, what did I do differently? Oh, I put a couple of acronyms behind my name in my LinkedIn profile. And so using that same search word technology that people are looking for, if you add that to your LinkedIn profile, it has the opportunity for the AI to do what it does best, and that's to link the right person with the right job.
Thank you. Sara.
I think I would add that if you apply to a job with the same company, do not think that the recruiter or human resources has automatically routed out your resume to every position for which you qualify. You would want to go into the employment site and apply for any and every position that you feel that you're qualified for. And one thing that I really like about our applicant tracking system, and it's probably the same for any, is that our hiring managers can instantly access your application the second that you confirm and publish your application to us. So they will be able to access that. And sometimes you'll see when you're filling out your applications, there are screening questions. You just want to make sure you answer those honestly and just thoroughly fill everything out. And I think that will lead to some success.
Thank you, Sara. One of the things, of course, you have to upload your resume. What are some common resume mistakes or things that are not included on the resume that you would recommend them? People really taking a closer look at before they apply.
Well, with your resume, of course, you want to make sure that the information that you're putting on your resume is accurate. Try to actually drill down on the dates that you were employed with your past employment. Do not hesitate to put any internship opportunities, especially if you are newly introducing yourself to the workforce after college. Volunteer opportunities that you've had in the past. Your education is important. You can always highlight a skill set that you're tailoring to the job that you're applying for. And just make sure that you give it a really good 2-3 time once over. Let a friend look over it to make sure that you have your spelling correct, that you have everything capitalized it should be. I wouldn't go into a tremendous amount of detail on your resume. You want to give the hard-hitting information that you need to, but keep in mind that those who are looking at your resume may be looking at a lot of resumes. So you want to give the most important but thorough information that you can.
Thank you, Sara.
Yeah, to piggyback, Glenn, the resume, if you put the things up front for what the job is looking for, don't put them at the bottom of the resume, put them up front. So it's easier for the person to identify. I hate looking through a resume and I have to search and search and search what I'm looking for. Again, as we talked about previously, tailoring the resume. The specific question, what are some big mistakes that people do? I think people try to get too creative sometimes with the resume. They're trying to put all of these shiny objects and things like this. When I think of a resume, I think about the person who's trying to flip the house. You want to make the resume to appeal to the widest audience possible, but also include the must-haves. We know that kitchen and baths sells houses, and resumes, skills and qualifications sell jobs. Let me know your skills, your qualifications, put that in the resume and put that up front. Don't put it at the bottom, and don't try to oversell yourself. Be genuine. When I look at the resume, I should be able to identify who this person is. This is a roadmap to who you are. And if I can't see that in your resume, I'm thinking to myself, next candidate.
Yeah. What about you, Raymond?
I would just say, don't omit anything. I think Sarah talked about the job history a little bit. Don't omit anything. For me, I am a hiring manager. I'm going to get in an interview, and we're going to talk through your job history to some degree. There may be behavioral based questions that I ask you about, and you're going to answer those, but you answer them about a job that's not listed on there. And then we get into that conversation. It's not upfront. So just list your history as it is and don't omit anything.
Thank you all. I think you all make some valid points, especially with being creative. I see a lot of resumes that students bring me, and they have pictures and color and crazy fonts and all of those things. Depending on your industry, maybe you're a graphic designer, maybe that will work, but that may not work for a particular business. That's the reason you need to kind of research the culture of that company and see if that matches what that company looks like. Okay, so we talked about resumes, cover letters. Let's talk about your references, and how we pick references. So what should students or job seekers consider before putting a reference down, or even are references relevant nowadays?
I absolutely think they're relevant, and what I do and how I interview. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is that people will list references, but they won't have spoken to that reference, or they won't have prepped that reference for the job that they're applying, and they're not expecting that phone call. So I think number one is, really make sure you're vetting your references first. Make sure that you've talked to them, you've told them that or asked them if they could be a reference for you, and then tell them who they may be getting that phone call from. In the digital age as well, a lot of people won't answer their phones if they don't recognize the number, right? And so that's a challenge when you're trying to get in touch with a reference and they're not calling you back, or they're not expecting that phone call. So I would say make sure you vet those references and make them aware.
Bruce.
Yeah, Glenn, for me, I think references are something that if you put a bad reference on your resume, shame on you. I've never called a reference, well, I won't say never, but to call a reference and they say, oh, this is the worst person ever, stay away. But they put you down here as a reference. Most people put references that they know are going to say something positive about them. So for me as a hiring person, I'm a little skeptical. What I like to see from a candidate, I want to see your past 2 to 3 years evaluations from your previous employer. I want to see some type of evidence of continuing education. I want to see some things that you've done. If you can come to the interview with some type of portfolio of your work history, to me, that tangible stuff goes a long way. Of course, we're going to make those phone calls. We're going to do the status quo that we have to do, but I'm always somewhat skeptical about referencing, especially when they're family members. I'm like, give me a break.
Sarah.
Yes, I agree with Bruce and Raymond. I do think there is a place for references still in the job hunt. However, I do think they're a little less relevant because as an employer, you would assume that the applicant is only going to put names of individuals that are going to give favorable information about the applicant. I would like to see professional references, and then a personal reference has a place too, but mainly professional references that can speak to your past work experience.
Mm-hmm. I think the choice, should be evaluated. And I've had students before even list, they said they worked the summer for their parent, or they work for the parent. People are going to question that. They see somebody with the same last name as a reference. And so, and the other thing is make sure you get permission from those references. I always send a letter, no matter whether it's applying to graduate school or applying for a job. Vet your references out a little bit, ask their permission, and let them know. And the other thing that I do that I've learned over the years is if you have an interview and the interview goes really well, Sarah interviews me, and I feel like we hit it off, and I feel like she's going to call me and offer me a job eventually. What I'll do is call my references, right? And I call my references and say, hey, I had a great interview at Cabell-Huntington today for an HR position. And here's some things that she really hit on. Here's some things that the job entails. Talk about my experience, my internship that I did with you. If you could do that, and you kind of help them, and give them some talking points. And it's not being dishonest. You're just giving them information so they can be a better reference for you when they do call. And so our next question is, we've had a lot, even at Marshall, we've had virtual career fairs. There's virtual interviews. What's some advice for job seekers as they approach a recruiter, whether it is a virtual interview, a virtual career fair, things to be aware of as they're planning to talk to someone virtually, like we're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. Glenn, if I can take this question, or at least start it. I think you have to be prepared for that virtual interview, that virtual engagement, just like anything else. Check your microphone, check your camera, check your lighting, all of those things. If you're going to use a virtual background like this nice old Maine background that I have here of my office, make sure that you have a professional looking virtual background. If you're going to use your own common space, make sure that it's clean and tidy and neat, just like my panelists here on their backgrounds. One thing I will say is, if it's possible for you to do a technology test prior to the interview with that person or with their assistants, ask them, say, look, I'm just now installing Microsoft Teams on my computer for the first time. Is it possible that we can do a technology test prior to our virtual meeting that we have scheduled for next week? I think that those are all good things to do. Check your microphone. Even before we were getting on here, one of the panelist members, Sarah, she said, hey, Glenn, how's my volume coming across? You don't want to wait till the end of the interview to make sure that the person never heard a single word that you said, and they were just too kind to tell you that you had all this background noise in there. So those are good things to do up front when it comes to this virtual technology. One thing that I've learned from some of our communication folks here on campus is that when you're speaking virtually, you have to be more animated for some reason. I don't know why. I've gotten a little better at this, but when I first started this Zoom stuff, I was terrible. But I now learned that I'm talking not to the computer, but I'm talking to an audience inside the office here. So keep that in the back of your mind. Practice, and you'll be just fine with it.
Thanks, Bruce. Sarah.
My number one tip is to wear pants. Okay, just joking, but you should still dress professional even for a virtual interview, a virtual job fair. Still dress professional head to toe. First tip. But other pieces of advice for any type of interview, in person or virtual, you do need to prepare. It sounds so dorky to prepare for an interview, but spend some time with yourself and your resume. Study the job description, study yourself, think about possible questions you may be asked. How are you going to answer them? Because I think some people can be even a little bit more nervous virtually because it's just a different experience between screens. You can't read the other person very well. So you may be a little bit more nervous, and you want to be able to pull out the information that you need to communicate concisely. And if you prepare for it, you'll be more likely to get there with that.
Very good. Raymond.
I wouldn't add a whole lot. I think initially I thought, oh no, Sarah knows I'm not wearing pants today, but no, obviously practice, be prepared. Make sure you're not going to have any distractions. I mean, when we got this started, Glenn and I were talking about where I was today. I came home because I can really control this environment. No one's going to bust into the office or knock on the door, not going to hear any distractions. So that's important. I know everyone always talks about it. And I think Bruce talked about being animated, but smiling, getting hyped before it, especially if it's going to be an interview. It's okay to have a little pregame music, clap it up a little bit, get excited about it. So on camera, it shines through because it is, it's more challenging, I believe, than in person because the body language, all that body language and all those cues that you typically get from someone you're speaking to, you're not going to get those necessarily. So it's a lot more challenging and you're going to have to bring the thunder on that interview. And it's not going to go away. I think even as we come out of this pandemic and, get vaccinated, I don't think that the virtual interviews are going to go away because one, it's really convenient and it's really efficient. So I think it's going to be the way of the future. So practice, practice, practice. If you have to get on there with, a roommate or a friend or, your parents or something and really go over some interview questions, what you look like, how you sound, how you feel to get comfortable with it. So.
That's great advice, you all. We talked about, of course, you want to wear pants, but what, if you're going to interview, and it might be virtual, your first interview, it's sort of a screening interview, if you will. It still may be virtual. It may be that we do some in-person interviews in the future. So, what should I wear in my interview? I'll just leave it there and kind of let you answer it.
Well, you definitely want to wear pants, as we've been harping on that, right? To the in-person interview. I was able to conduct my first in-person interview last week for the first time in a year, and it was different. And as many in-person interviews that I conducted before, it just seemed different because it's been so long since we have been able to do this. But as we've talked about, there's definitely certain cues that we pick up in that in-person environment than we do in the virtual environment. Now, here's one trick and tip that I use. Prior to going to an interview, when I want to know what to wear, it's like, birds of a feather flock together. So I try to identify what is the norm and the culture of the environment and what do they wear at that particular place. So prior to taking the job here at Marshall University, I was snooping around on the websites of all of the other kind of business folks. And I noticed a lot of them wore the green ties with a little Marshall pin, black or dark blue suit. And so, of course, I showed up with my interview and I looked just like them, right? And so I always try to figure out what are they wearing and take it one step higher. That's my advice.
Great. Sara.
Great advice, Bruce. I would say, dress a little bit more conservative than maybe you would in your personal life. You just want to make sure, you don't have to have the best of the best when it comes to what you're wearing. Just try to look professional. If you're not sure what to wear, get some opinions of some professional influences in your life, and just, look as put together as you can.
Raymond.
Closed-toed shoes, probably, for the most part. It probably does depend on the industry and where you're interviewing. Like Bruce said, if you can find out what the culture is, that would be the best because it does vary.
I don't think there's much to add there. I think just bring your best, right? And you know what that is and what that looks like for you. Proper grooming. If you're in doubt, come dressed like Bruce. You're not going to ever be overdressed, I don't think, for an interview. I think more than anything, you're going to impress the employer if you are a tad overdressed. We want to know that you're taking it seriously. And so, if you're in doubt, come with your very best.
Yeah, the interviewer is going to look you up and down, right? They're gonna check you out. I remember working in career services and having a student arrive, and he was in a wonderful suit. I mean, he looked sharp and put together, but then you look down and he was in sandals. And so
Is ahead of his time.
I guess he just forgot to buy dress shoes. So he was in sandals, and really it did cost him the job because the employer, even though he was a 4.0 student, those sandals didn't do it for that employer. And so those are just small things to consider. I mean, people are gonna check you out. So as students or, job seekers are in the interview, one of the questions are behavioral interview questions. Sort of questions like, could you tell me about a time that you were a leader or you handled an emergency situation or you dealt with a disgruntled customer? How should we answer those questions?
I'll take the lead on this if you don't mind. I think number one is try to be specific. I think sometimes candidates will talk about what they would do in that scenario, and that's not necessarily, that's absolutely not what we're looking for. We're looking for what you did exactly in that situation. And I'll take, even if it takes them a little time to think of that instance or that situation, I'd much rather hear what they did specifically than what they would do or how they would handle a situation, because that really doesn't tell me anything about their history. And behavioral-based questions are really just trying to find out, historically, what was your behavior like? And what can we expect from you in the future? And so be really specific if you can.
Great.
Yeah, if I can add, behavioral-based interviewing concept has been around for a long time. It's not necessarily anything new, but what recruiters and interviewers are coming to the knowledge of is that it is the best way to detect past behavior. Past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior, right? And so we've been asking these behavioral-based questions. As Raymond pointed out, it's a difficult question. It's designed to be that way. And if you get into an interview environment and we ask one of these behavioral-based questions and you're stumped, you just can't think of anything, just simply don't get scared, don't panic, just simply say, you know what, I can't think of anything right now. Can we come back to that question? Something will come to mind that will trigger, right? And just keep moving. It's okay to have a 30-second pause, but sometimes that pause can be uncomfortable for you and also for the interviewer. But it's okay, because we really want to get to the heart of who you are. And so don't be afraid, don't break down, don't panic, just simply take the pause. If you can't think of anything immediate, don't make anything up because you think that's what we want to hear. Bad thing to do. Simply pause, say, let me come back to that. It'll come to me shortly.
Yeah, that's why I just keep drilling down the prepare for your interview. The more prepared you are, the easier it is going to be to answer those difficult questions. And when you do answer those type of questions, just try to you want to give information and be open, but you don't want to give too much information and go on and on and on about the same question, or talk about your personal life too much, all of that. So you just want to provide what you have to provide and keep it concise.
I think Sarah makes a really good point. One of the tools that I encourage students to use is called the STAR method, right? I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. You probably are. The first thing that they talk about is the situation, right? What happened? What was their task? What action they took? And what the result was. And so that is ingrained in my brain from learning that many years ago. But it's a great situation. That way you have, a method or technique to use in those questions. I used to go, and I was that interviewee. I would talk and go on and on and on and on and on and tell you everything that I ever knew. And I didn't have to do that. I just need to just talk about what happened and what the result was. Okay. One of the questions that I had trouble with early on in my career was, tell me about yourself. How should job seekers handle that question?
Yeah, absolutely. We call it the elevator speech, the 30-second speech, the swag speech. It's how do you tell somebody in 30 seconds to a minute who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. Who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. If you can think of it in that concept, as we did our introductions today, the three of us, we all introduced ourselves. It was very small. It was very concise. It was within 30 seconds to a minute, we introduced ourselves. That needs to be your 30-second speech. Who you are, where you've been, where you're going, what you can bring to the table.
Probably not a lot I can add to that. Just to piggyback, yes, be strategic with this, but it's almost a test in and of itself, because you can just go in so many different directions and be really broad with it or get detailed with it. But no, kind of, it needs to be used as a way to show that employer why you would be a great person for that role.
Right.
I would just add practice, practice, practice. You got to get comfortable with it so that it flows. It's who you are. And it sounds simple, but when you're put on that spot and you're thinking, what do they want to hear? It's not necessarily what we want to hear. We want to hear who you are. If you're comfortable, confident with it, it's going to come through a lot better than if you're trying to think about or anticipate what we want to hear. So practice it, live it. It's you. It should be simple, but if you don't practice, you get caught in that moment and you're not sure what you reveal.
Yeah, I think you all bring up some good points. You know, when I talk to students in a mock interview, and mock interview them, my favorite thing is when they'll tell me, well, I have 2 cats, I have a dog, I like to deer hunt, or I like to, whatever their hobbies are, they'll talk about that. It's everything except about themselves professionally, you know, and so keep it professional. Those are good points.
Yeah, there's some things that we don't need to know, right? Yeah. So don't volunteer those things up. You know, I see that quite a bit where I'll hear information. I'm like, gosh, I wish you hadn't said that, because it's gonna impact your interview. So,
and you know, and if people want, and I tell students not to even put hobbies on their resume unless it's related to the job, of course. And you know, you may end up talking to the employer a little bit about your personal life or whatever at the end, or they may share something, or you make a connection with them somehow. You can talk about it then. If they say, well, I like to do this on the weekend, maybe you relate to it, maybe you can say something, but those are things that you don't want to necessarily bring out during the interview. Is it okay, to write things down? I encourage students to take a portfolio with them with some extra copies of their resume into an interview. Is it okay for them to write questions down or thoughts down while they're interviewing?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great sign that they are interested in what you're saying and the position and the company. So I would definitely encourage, if they're comfortable and they want to write something down, I think it's a great sign.
I think it's absolutely great. You know, one of the things that's important to me is that the candidate has really thought about the opportunity and researched the opportunity. You know, for me, if I'm hiring you on, it's what I do for a living and it's my career. So it's important to me that you've thought it through as well. I would absolutely encourage them to write things down and to ask questions, obviously. But, you know, another thing that I think having that notepad or that binder there does is, you know, in terms of interviewing, it creates a barrier there in case there's not a desk or something else, and it gives you something to do with your hands. You know, it's kind of one of these, what I do with my hands things. So, you know, I think it can provide that for a candidate if they're a little nervous, right? So you've got that sitting there, got something to do with your hands. If you want to divert your eyes a little bit and look down, that's okay too. But yeah, I like it when they're writing things.
Yeah, Glenn, and in terms of bringing extra copies of your resume with you and things of that nature, don't assume that we have everything that you provided. You know, sometimes interviewers may come to the panel interview and they didn't bring your resume. And here you are talking about all of this stuff in your resume and how great you are. And you've assumed that they have a copy of it. Well, they should, but sometimes they don't do their homework either. So you bring an extra copy of your portfolio, your resume, or whatever it is that you want them to have. This is your opportunity to sell yourself. And agree with my panelist members here, taking notes, asking follow-up questions are a great sign that you're engaged in this thing. Remember, the interview process, as I liken to going on a date, this is a two-way street here. We're trying to engage you, and you should be trying to engage us as well. Don't expect that we're going to tell you everything and you just sit back there and collect all the benefits and don't provide anything back to the interview process, right? If you go on a date with somebody and they treated you that way, well, that's going to be the last date, right? Same thing with the interview. It has to be something where you're trying to sell yourself as well. Don't forget, you have goods too, right? Don't give your goods away for free. make sure that they give you the answers that you want in this process.
Those are some great tips. And we in this speaker series, if they complete the speaker series and they complete the requirements, we award them a portfolio, and that's one of the things that we do. And so I think carrying that with you and carrying extra. I've been in interviews before, and I was younger, and I didn't ask, okay, who am I interviewing with? Is it a panel? Is it, am I one-on-one? One time I gave a presentation and I was very young. It was for the University of Louisville. They said, you'll be doing a presentation. I said, okay. And I walk into the room and there's 75 people. And so asking questions like that before the interview is pretty important too. So I'm wrapping up the interview now with the recruiter, and they say, are there any more questions? What's the best way to wrap up that interview with that employer, with that recruiter?
Well, I say if you do have a few questions, go ahead and ask them. That's a great opportunity. Again, it shows that you're interested and you are assessing if you would be a fit as well, and if you would want to even accept the job if one would be offered to you. So use that time and maybe just not ask too many questions, but 2 or 3 questions would be a great amount to show that you're interested and get some information.
Yeah. If I can add, be strategic in your question answering also. One of the things that I do not like candidates to ask me, we have not even started employment and they already asked the question, how much vacation am I going to get with this job? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's kind of like back to my dating situation. You're already asking me how much money is in my bank account and how much am I willing to give you before we even got to the second date. Now, I told the panelist member I was going to try to be PG-13 with my analogies here today. So I will be PG-13. But here's what I will say, though. Make sure that your questions that you ask, number one, that you have questions. Here you are about to start a new career, a new job, and you don't have a single question. That's a big no-no. Make sure that you have some questions. Ask something about the job. What kind of qualifications are you looking for in a candidate for this job? How do you like working for this employer? What are the biggest challenges that this employer has engaged with over the last year? What has been the challenges that this employer has engaged with during the pandemic? How have you strategically organized your organization to meet the needs of your customers? Ask questions related to the job, and then you can then tie back into how your skill set fits their biggest challenges. So come prepared, as Sara said, do your homework.
Raymond?
I would tell Bruce, preach. That is absolutely a lot of things that I like to see. As I talked about before, I like to know that the candidate has really thought about this career and researched it. So the questions that you ask will indicate some of that for me. I think number 2, as Bruce alluded to, you also, if you didn't get across some of the skill sets you wanted to, your questions can actually dial you back into that so you can talk about it. And then also, ultimately, I think, there have been opportunities where candidates have actually won the interview that they weren't going to win based on the questions that they asked for me and brought me back into it, because maybe my behavioral based questions didn't get to who they were. But as we talked about these questions they were able to save the interview for me, which is always obviously a great situation, but making sure that you're prepared for that. And then, I don't know if we were going to talk about that, but I like somebody who's a little aggressive and asks for the opportunity. I don't think that's, maybe that's a little old school, but I like for somebody to ask for the second date, to ask me what that looks like and get me engaged in the process. So that we can talk further about it. I think you also can glean some information from that too, and how I'm answering those questions. If I have a candidate I really like, I'm going to really be into answering those questions for them. And you're going to be able to probably tell, because just as Bruce said, at that point, I'm probably selling you on the opportunity, right? I'm probably trying to get you pumped up and, ready to take on this career and bring you onto my team. So that can be an indicator for you.
That's great. I always say, when, talking about vacation time, I've had candidates, even when I've interviewed, we've had openings here at Marshall for the candidate to say, well, how much money does this pay? Right off, so you don't want to pull out the engagement ring on the first date, right? You want to give it some time. If the employer starts talking about it, of course, then you can start, engaging in that conversation. But wait for the employer to make that first move. Yes, Sarah.
Another tip I'm going to suggest that maybe one should avoid is telling whoever you're interviewing with that you're looking for a foot in the door. That, to go back to the dating analogy, that's like saying to your date, I think you're great for right now, but I'm really hoping to date your friend. So I would avoid that, because the employer may want to look at a more long-term candidate. And so you may get passed over for the job because of that. It's just a little bit off-putting, I would say. Of course, employers are going to understand that you want to advance in your career, but I just would avoid saying that phrase.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else have any comments about that?
I couldn't be more in agreement with that. I mean, one of the comments I hear is, I've heard this is a great stepping stone. Okay. Not today. So yeah, anything that alludes to the next thing. Now, if it's within the company, I think if you go and follow up with, hey, a foot in the door with your company, and then, go on to talk about where your future looks, what the future may look like within the company, fine. But, to say this is a stepping stone, not going to be a good look for you.
Yeah, I've had someone say to me one time, I was interviewing them. I said, what's your goal in 5 years? What's your plan? They said, I want your job. And so that was an interesting response. So, so the interview's over, and we've wrapped it up. So is the job seeker finished? Should they just sit there and wait for a response? What should they do once the interview's over?
Yeah, so I'm kind of old school on this, but after that particular interview, I still like some type of follow-up from the candidate. Handwritten thank you notes for your time, I think really go a long way. At least some type of electronic communication. Again, it's where you can take the opportunity to talk about or sell some things that you didn't get to do in the interview. But again, you got to remember the purpose for the follow-up. And the purpose is really just to thank them for their time and the opportunity. Don't go into some big, I can do all of this for your company. It's really just the value of that is you having enough thought to say, thank you for taking time out and giving me the opportunity to share my skill set with you. If you have any questions, or if there's anything else I can ask about anything that you didn't understand, or any follow-up questions, here's how you can reach me.
I'll take flowers. No, I think it's a nice touch. I think electronically and email for me is best. Obviously, and I'll talk a little bit more about this maybe in a minute, but the job market and the way it is, I'm pretty aggressive with candidates that I like, and I'm looking to make a decision pretty quickly. So, if you can shoot that to me within a couple hours, it just brings you back to top of mind for me. I do think it's a nice touch and something that's old school, but I have gotten thank you notes and that type of stuff, but that takes maybe a day or two to get to you. It's a age of right now, and I'm looking to make a decision pretty quickly. So to get that email over quickly, I think is important.
Anyone else, Sarah?
I agree. I'm trying to think about if I have anything to add to that. When you leave the interview, you should have some sort of time expectation. Your interviewer should let you know you will hear something within a week or within the next couple days. But yeah, still go ahead and send that thank you for their time and for interviewing you. It's a great touch. It may be old school, but it is not outdated.
And I think there's a fine line between, following up. It's been 2 weeks between following up and stalking. So if you can follow up in 2 weeks with the email and just saying, I'm just curious where I am in the process. I'm just to let you know, I'm still interested. I enjoyed meeting with you, just to follow up with them. But you definitely don't want to keep calling. You don't want to keep emailing week after week after day after day. You need to close the door on it if you haven't heard anything. after a period of time. So what are your all's thoughts about that? I'm sure you have experiences.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of those great follow-up questions that we talked about at the end of the interview. One of the follow-up questions could be, what is your timeline that you're looking to fill this position? If they tell you 2 weeks, right? Give them the 2 weeks. If they tell you 2 months, give them the 2 months. If they tell you 2 days, at least give them the time of their timeline. If they tell you 2 weeks and you're calling the next day talking about, you got an answer yet? Do you know anything? You want to hire me? I mean, give them the time that they ask. But I think that's a good follow-up question. If we could go back real quickly, because I think this is important. Sarah had mentioned something earlier, and she was talking about, one of her pet peeves, or never say, I'm just trying to get a foot in the door, right? So, the reason for our chat today is to talk about navigating the job market during the pandemic, right? And so we have to somehow, in this environment, some of our folks who really want a job in a certain area, you may have to navigate to a different area with your same skill set. And although you're truly only doing that for that stepping stone, you never want to show your cards though, right? So It's okay to still be doing it to get a foot in the door. Right. Just don't show your cards.
Right.
Agreed.
Absolutely. You don't want to say too much, during the interview. I mean, you definitely want to answer the questions, but everyone has a plan, but your plan, you want to make sure that your plan is to stay with that company or organization, right? You don't want to say, well, right. My goal is just to be here for your internship program and then I'm moving on, or whatever. But your goal should definitely want to be to stay there. Do you all have any additional comments or tips for students as they as they conduct their job search during this pandemic?
Yeah, Glenn, I would say, just to go back to the last question real quick, if an employer gives you a time frame and they miss it by a little bit, fine. But if they put you off, especially in this job market for that long run, I think you guys as students right now are in a very unique position. I think the job market is great right now, and employers that are really serious about you are going to be aggressive. And, if they can't meet their own timeline and deadlines with talking to you about the opportunity, I would run as fast as I could, because that's probably what you're going to be able to expect once you become employed there. So that's what I say about the 2 week or the week or the 24-hour thing. I think on the flip side of that is be prepared to interview quickly. Again, the job market is really good right now. For me personally, if I have a candidate I like, I'm pretty aggressive. I will get back to you typically within 24 to 48 hours. There's a 3 interview process with my company. And so by the time you get to me, you've been through an interview. Once I get that information from my recruiter, I call you pretty quickly and almost move my schedule around to interview you, to get you in, and then try to get back to you as quick as possible. Again, once you've sold me, I'm going to try to pick up my product and run to the cashier as quick as possible. So, I think people are going to be pretty aggressive about it. And you're in a unique position right now. Don't take it for granted, but be prepared. I think one of the bigger challenges I have is when I call to schedule an interview with someone and I'm like, hey, how soon could you get in? And they put me off for a week or two. Okay, well, that's a week or two of other candidates that are going to come through the door. If you can squeeze me in, and I'm pretty flexible, I'll move some things around for you. You want to do that, and be prepared to do that.
Sarah?
I would say answer your phone. If you are actively applying for jobs, and maybe even many jobs, you're going to get calls. Hopefully that's the goal. And I know we're all a little scared to answer numbers that we don't know. So if you're not going to answer the phone number that you don't know, make sure that your voicemail is set up. So a lot of people's voicemails are not set up, or they're full, because some people, maybe the Gen Zs, do not listen to voicemails anymore, I hear. And apparently side parts are out. I mean, it's all different now, but still you need to have that voicemail set up, and then you need to respond and get back with that recruiter as soon as possible. And like Raymond said, make yourself available to interview as soon as possible. So you just need to be responsive.
Bruce?
Yeah, I can't say that enough. One of my biggest pet peeves is that you applied for my job. You wanted me. When I call you to give you the opportunity, you stand me up. You're not available. You ghost me in this new terminology. I'm trying to get you. I can't answer. You're not checking your email. All of this different stuff. I can't reach you. If I can't reach you in this environment, what makes you think that I'm going to be able to reach you in the work environment? So that's the biggest turnoff. Make sure that you're available and flexible. If you have something, even if it's important to you, you got to weigh what's more important, date night, friends, or whatever, movies, or this interview. I need to go home and prepare for it and make myself available tomorrow. So if you're searching for a job, make yourself available. That's one of the biggest pet peeves I have. There's a lot of jobs out there that the market is saturated right now. Specifically, you got to follow the market. Of course, a lot of things has been shut down because of the pandemic, but follow the shift in technology. Follow the shift in the distribution line. Amazon's booming, Walmart's booming, the grocery stores, Kroger's, the Lowe's, the Home Depots, all of the laboratory testing companies, the technology companies. The technology companies are booming as a result of the pandemic. So follow the UPS, the FedEx, all of that delivery line. Follow that technology line that has resulted as a part of the pandemic, and you can find employment there. Those folks are hiring left and right.
Those are good tips. And you mentioned answer your phone, and I will add on to that. Make sure that your voicemail is not full, right? Make sure you clear it out, that you have a professional message, on there, and that don't answer your phone if you are busy or you're around kids or you're distracted or there's things going on. Let it go to your voicemail and answer it later. You don't want to be in a situation where you're at McDonald's and there's or wherever it may be, you're somewhere out and there's a lot of noise. It's distracting to the employer and it's distracting to you as well. We do have a question from Dr. Margie McInerney. Some of you may know Dr. McInerney. If you can't start the job until after graduation, and you want a vacation, or there's a wedding that you've planned or that you have to participate in, and they get the offer, how can they discuss that with the employer? How can they bring that up before they take the job or after they take the job?
Yeah, I would advise discussing that after the offer as soon as possible. Be upfront and let your manager, your future manager, know that you do have this coming up and that you understand that you'll likely have to take it unpaid because you just started with the company, but that you do already have those plans set. And most employers are going to understand that and permit you to have that time off and work with you.
Yeah, I agree. As Sarah said it best, the timing on this, make sure that you have the offer in hand first before you disclose this information. Now, as an employer, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but it's the right thing to do. Look, if you tell the employer at first, they may use that against you, right? Again, but there's no obligation, right, for you to disclose this information. Make sure that they're willing to put a ring on it before you tell them how much is in your bank account. And that's what this question is talking about, Dr. McInerney. Make sure that they're willing to put a ring on it before we tell them how much is in our bank account.
Raymond.
I don't know if there's anything to add to that. I think it's perfect.
Okay, excellent. I want to thank each of you, Bruce, Sarah, and Raymond, for you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to do this. I know that you're either at work or you've taken off work or it's in the middle of your day. And I just want to really thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules. We really appreciate it on behalf of the Lewis College of Business, CohenTalks, Sam, Sherm. We really appreciate your involvement with our college. And I also want to thank Dr. Margie McInerney, our Assistant Dean of Students, Matt James, but we know why Matt James is here. It's because Sarah is. He's on the call. He's watching you, Sarah. I just want to thank you all for your time. And if some of our students want to reach out to you all, how can they do that?
Yeah, feel free to email or call me. My email, it's probably the best method, is sarah.james@chhi.org. and it's spelled SARA period James, JAM, as in Marshall, ES @chhi.org. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you,
It's
Sarah.
fun.
Yes, I'll put in the chat box,
Oh.
Felder1@marshall.edu, human resources _resources at marshall.edu. Feel free to reach out to me or my department anytime, anything that we can do to help you, we're more than happy to do so.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Glenn. We are absolutely hiring at this point in the local area, both interns and full-time employees. So we're typically hiring year-round. We always want to get the best candidates. So keep that in mind. If you're a May graduate, apply right away. If you're a fall or next year graduate, it's okay to apply for the internship program. I put my email address out in the chat box as well, but it's raymond.washington@ehi.com.
Great. Well, thank you all. If you have nothing to add, that no one else has anything to add, that concludes our session. And again, thank you all. And I really appreciate you all being here today.
Thanks,
Thank
Glenn.
you.
Thank you. You all have a great afternoon.
You too, pleasure.